This episode of Game Geeks is sponsored by DriveThruRPG.com. Hi folks, welcome back to Game Geeks. I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Today's episode, we are going to be reviewing our first sponsored product from DriveThruRPG.com, FantasyCraft. Now, as you can see, I have FantasyCraft coming out at the seams, it would seem, in this 3-ring binder here. Notice that it's blue and not black. That has no significance other than the fact that that was the one I had handy. Anyway, this is a PDF download that was provided to me by DriveThruRPG.com of the FantasyCraft product. If at any point during this review or afterwards you think you're interested in getting your hands on this PDF, the kindly folks over at DriveThru have volunteered to provide a 20% discount to purchasers for about 3 months after the initial airing of this episode. The code for this download, which you can see below, is Game Geeks FantasyCraft. Put that in on your little coupon code or gift certificate code area toward the bottom of the page, and you'll get a 20% discount off of this product. Well, enough jibber jabber. What is FantasyCraft? This is a D20 fantasy game. But what makes this different from, say, Dungeons & Dragons 3.0, 3.5, or 4.0, or even its first cousin Pathfinder, is it has basically deconstructed the entire D20 engine and rebuilt it from the ground up. If you watched our previous review of Spycraft, which is essentially the same sort of engine, Spycraft 2.0 as I called it then, the same basic engine but as applied to a modern espionage setting, they provided the same treatment to the fantasy game. So let's get right into it. What do you have here? Well, you have your standard character creation. Now, your character creation comes in the form of you've got a variety of races to choose from, everything from your standard ones. You've got your elves, your dwarves, your small people or the petch. Humans, of course, are always there. Then there are some more strange ones. You could play an ogre, an orc, not that different, a drake, which is sort of like a small dragon, a root walker, if you just really have to play a tree, or an unborn, which is sort of a construct type of character. The picture they use at one point looks like some sort of mechanical beholder. The other option would be something along the lines of the Warforged from the Eberron setting. Now, if you're a human, you get a talent to go along with your character, for example. So if you're a human, you might be, they give you a variety to choose from: adaptable, intelligent, striking, svelte, wily. Some of these give you modifiers to your attributes, some of them don't, but each one of them gives you some sort of little shtick, maybe an extra feat, another way that you could use some of your skills. So let's take a look at Svelte, for example. You get +2 to your charisma, but -2 to your wisdom. You are charming, you have enlightened athletics, and you are rock solid and can shove people. So this is sort of the thing for your good-looking, nimble types. Now, if you're a race, elf, dwarf, unborn, etc., you don't get the talent because some of that is already packaged in with your race. For example, I have some of my notes here to look at. If you're a dwarf, some of that comes packaged in is you have better con but less dex, your base speed, you have certain banned actions you cannot do. For example, you cannot jump, kick, or swim. If you're a dwarf, you're better at some skills, you're more stable, low light vision, thick hide, etc. Each class, however, in addition to their talent or race attribute, gets a specialty. This is sort of like what your character is outside of the class. So you could be an acrobat, a druid, a physician. These can combine nicely with your classes, which we'll get to in a minute, or they can kind of sort of serve in opposition. What all of this gives you between your talent and your specialty or your race is the ability to really hone in and customize your character to a level that most D20 games don't give. As much as I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, most D20 games, a fighter is a fighter is a fighter. Here you can have a different talent, a different specialty, and still be a warrior or soldier type. One more thing about the races is there's ways within each of the races to sort of hone in who you are. For example, if you are an elf, you can hone in that you are a high elf, which is basically standard what you are. There are some feats you can take to sort of focus in on being a gray elf, a wild elf, or a drow. Dwarves, you have hill dwarf or magma dwarf, for example. Humans, you can even come in with some of these race feats or racial feats, and you can sort of say that you are of celestial blood, or you are of infernal blood, draconic, fey, etc. Sort of what you used to have with some of the sorcerer types in Dungeons & Dragons 3.0 and 3.5, more defined in Pathfinder. But you don't have, you can be a fighter who is of Fey blood, if you really wanted to. You don't have to be a sorcerer now to get some of those attributes. The classes themselves have been redone to a certain extent. A lot of the typical classes that you're used to may or may not be there or be there in different types. Your options include assassin, burglar, lancer, mage, priest, about what you'd expect. Soldier, there are some expert classes that are combined in there, such as edge master, paladin, or swashbuckler. Each of the classes sort of gives its own, has a standard D20 advancement chart, your base attack bonus, your fortitude, reflex, and willpower saves, defense, initiative, lifestyle, which is sort of like what your income looks like, your legend, and finally some special shticks that come with each level. These obviously get better as you go. The longer you stay in a class, the better you are at it. There is no obvious penalty for multiclassing. So if you really wanted to play the assassin, lancer, sorcerer, go right ahead. Nothing to stop you there. What this gives you, in my opinion, is an almost unprecedented detail to your character that brings some mechanical push along with it. You can say a lot of these things in the background of your character in almost any game you want, but push comes to shove, you really don't get any shtick out of it. You just get that background as a note for your role-playing or as sort of a guideline for your GM to give them ideas, or maybe like a +1 here or there. Now, all of this detail has a mechanical benefit for you to hang your hat on and run with. The only downside to this is there's a lot of fiddly bits that you have to keep in mind. When you're old and addled like me, it's harder to remember, do I have a +2 or a +4 at this level? But if you are able to keep that in mind, then it's really good for you. The magic system in this, to be quite honest with you, is a little obscure for me. I was not able to, after several readings, I was still kind of scraping at it. I think once you got into it and actually played a magic user, though, it would work really well. There's a bestiary included that sort of gives you its own way to modify almost any monster you want to really make it whatever you're interested in having in your game at the time. So it's a fairly limited list with a lot of templates or modifiers you can throw on top of it. It gives a very nice section on how to develop your own campaign world, some campaign qualities. These sort of can alter your campaign world to what you want it to be by adding or subtracting the number of action dice your character gets. These aren't quite as powerful as, say, the drama points or the fate points in Unisystem or Fate, respectively, but they do help your character out a lot. Some of your class skills, some of your racial skills are fueled by your action dice. Finally, it gives you a nice adventure building section. What this game is, to be very honest with you, is self-contained. If you have a world that you want to make a game out of, for example, one of my personal favorites is Raymond E. Feist's Rift War series, then you could very easily shoehorn almost everything in the Rift War books into this Fantasy Craft book itself. This is for someone who likes the D20 engine but is interested in something different that doesn't even pretend to be Dungeons & Dragons anymore. It's something brand new, new classes, great background on the characters, really interesting setting. If you like D20, if you want a lot of depth to your D20 fantasy game, this is likely to be a very good book for you. If you are not into a whole lot of mechanical crunch, if you're not into having to keep track of, I get another +2 every 3 or 4 levels, then this might be something you want to think about. If you're interested in taking a look at it, or you think this is definitely for you, as a reminder, you can download this from drivethrurpg.com using the following code GameGeeksFantasyCraft to give you a 20% discount. You plug into the coupon code there at the bottom. I like it. This game has a lot of potential for a sort of a different feel for a fantasy game. Again, this episode has been sponsored by drivethrurpg.com. For Game Geeks, I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Good day and good gaming.
We average 9 new titles a day. That's over 60 a week. And we've got well over 15,000 RPG titles online right now. DriveThruRPG, the one true source for RPG.